Eagle by Rosemary Sutcliff, Chapter 10, Marching Orders. Presently, having bathed and changed, the four came together again in the small dining recess which opened from the atrium. This room was as austere as the rest of the house, the lime-washed walls bare of ornament save for the bronze-faced cavalry buckler with a pair of crossed javelins behind it, hanging opposite the entrance. The three couches about the table spread with beautifully dressed deerskins instead of the usual quilting and embroideries. And ordinarily the meals which Marcus and his uncle ate there were as austere as the room. But tonight was an occasion, and Sastika had bestirred herself to produce a dinner worthy of it. To Marcus, because Cub had come back, the whole room seemed to shimmer with a faint air of festival, and as he glanced about him by the soft yellow light of the palm oil lamps on the table, the future and the question of finding a livelihood could wait for the moment. He was pleasantly tired after a long day in the open. He had had a cold plunge and changed his rough tunic for one of soft white wool, and he was prepared even to keep a truce with Placidus, since Esca had only laughed when told of his arrival. The main part of dinner was over. Uncle Aquila had just poured the second libation to the household gods, whose little bronze statues stood with the salt cellars at the corners of the table, and Esca and the other slaves had gone their way. The soft, uncertain lamplight cast a delicate web of radiance over the table, making the red samman bowls glow like coral, turning the withered yellow apples of last year's harvest to the fruit of the Hesperides, casting here a bloom of light over the fluted curve of a glass cup, kindled there a pointed scarlet flame in the heart of a squat flask of Phalerean wine, strangely intensifying the faces of the men who leaned each on the left elbow round the table. It's a very ornate, very fancy dinner they're having with very, fancy goblets of wine and all this stuff. So far, the two older men had had most of the conversation to themselves, talking over old days, old skirmishes, old frontier camps, old friends and enemies, while Marcus and Placidus put a word in from time to time, spoke to each other occasionally. The truce was holding quite well, but for the most part ate their dinner in silence. And then, splashing water into the Phalerean in his cup, Uncle Aquila asked Claudius, "How long since you left the Fretensis?" 18 years in August. "Jupiter," said Uncle Aquila reflectively. Suddenly he glared at his old friend. 18 years in August since you and I sat at meat in the same mess, and yet you have been in Britain almost 3 and made no attempt, not the faintest attempt, to come near me." "Nor you to come near me," said Claudius, I can't say his name well, helping himself to one of Sastika's honey cakes and topping it with a cluster of raisins. He looked up from his plate, his strange face breaking into a winged, eager smile. Is it not most often so when we follow the eagles? We make a friend here and there in Achaia and Caesarea or Eburacum, and our ways part again. And then we take remarkably few pains to keep in touch with one another. But if the gods who rule the destinies of men bend our paths to cross again, why then we take up the old threads very much where we laid them down," said Uncle Aquila. He raised his recharged cup. "I drink to the old threads. No, I don't. It is only old men who look backward at all the time. I drink to the renewing of old threads." Do you come and renew them at Eburacum after I return?" said the legate as he set down his old cup. "It may be that I will do that one day. It is all of 25 years since I was last at Eburacum, and I should be interested to see the place again." Suddenly, bethinking himself of his manners, Uncle Aquila turned to include the young tribune. "I took a contingent of the 2nd up there in one of the troubles. It was thus that I came to know the station a little." "So," Placidus contrived to sound bored and polite at the same time. "That would be in the Hispanus time, of course. You would scarce recognize the station now. It is really almost habitable." The new generally build in stone, where the old cleared the forest and built in wood. So there's stone now in this place, Eburacum, where before people just used wood. The legate was staring reflectively into the heart of his wine. "Sometimes, Eburacum, it seems to me that the foundations of that old building lie uneasy beneath the new," he said. Marcus turned on him quickly. "You mean, sir?" Ibaracum is still, how shall I put it, still more than a little ghost-ridden by the Ninth Legion. Oh, I do not mean that their spirits have wandered back from the fields of Ra, but the place is haunted nonetheless, by the altars to Spanish gods that they set up and worshipped at, by their names and numbers idly scratched on walls, by British women whom they loved, and children with Spanish faces whom they fathered. All this lying, as it were, like a sediment under the new wine of another legion, although they linger strongly, almost terrifyingly, in the minds of the people. He made a small gesture with his open hand. It sounds little enough put into words, and yet it can create an atmosphere which is unpleasantly strong. I am not an imaginative man, but I tell you that there have been times when the mist comes down from the high moors, when I had more than half expected to see the lost legion coming marching home. There was a long silence, and a little shiver ran through the room, like a little wind through long grass. Uncle Aquila's face was unreadable. Placidus showed clearly his opinions of such vaporings. Then Marcus said, "Have you any idea, any theory, as to what became of the Hispana, sir?" The legate looked at him shrewdly. "Their fate has some importance for you?" "Yes, my father was their first cohort, Uncle Aquila's brother." The legate turned his head. "Aquila? I never knew that." "Oh, yes," said Uncle Aquila. "Did I never mention him to you? He never came much in my way. We were at opposite ends of the family, with 20 years between us." So Uncle Aquila is 20 years older than Marcus's dad. So that makes sense why he's kind of a bit older than Marcus, more so than maybe a normal uncle would be. The legate nodded, and after seeming to consider a moment, gave his attention back to Marcus. "There is, of course, the possibility that somewhere they were cut off and annihilated so completely that no survivors were left to carry back word of the disaster." Oh, but surely, sir," put in Placidus with a great show of deference, "in a province the size of Valentia, even in the whole of Caledonia, upward of 4,000 men could not be destroyed without trace. Is it not far more likely that, having their fill of the eagles, they merely butchered such of their officers that would not join with them, and deserted to the tribes?" Marcus said nothing. The tribune was his uncle's guest, but his mouth shut in a hard, hot line. "No, I do not particularly think it likely," said the legate. So Placidus is expressing something that probably not just him thinks about the Ninth Legion, of the fact that the whole of them just decided to abandon their orders, kill off all of their officers, and just go and live with the tribes up north. And the legate says, "I don't think that's actually likely." But Placidus had not yet finished planting his sting. "I stand corrected," he said silkily. "I was led to think it was the only possible explanation to the mystery by the extremely unsavory reputation the Hispana left behind them, but I am happy to find that I was at fault." "I am sure that you are," said the legate with a glint of humor. "But do you not find the ambush theory a very likely one either? But you do not find the ambush theory a very likely one either, I think, sir." Marcus helped himself carefully to a cluster of raisins, which he did not want. "I do not greatly care to believe that any legion of the Empire could have fallen so low, could have become such rotten fruit, as the other explanation would prove them." The legate hesitated, and his face seemed to grow keener. No longer the face of a man enjoying a pleasant meal, Marcus thought, but that of a soldier. He began to speak again abruptly. "There has been a rumor quite lately along the wall, incidentally giving me cause to wish profoundly that the Senate had not chosen this moment to recall me, though I leave behind a camp commandant and first cohort, both knowing more of the game than I shall ever do. A rumor, if it were true, would suggest that the Hispana did indeed go down fighting. Only market talk, but in such there is often a core of truth. The story runs that the eagle has been seen, that it is receiving divine honors in some tribal temple in the far north." So remember, the eagle is this big golden thing that they would hold on the top of their golden stick, their standard, that you would walk through, and it's very important to a legion. Uncle Aquila, who had been playing with his cup wine, set it down so sharply that a drop splashed over on his hand. "Go on," he said, as the other halted. "That is all. There is no more to add, no more to work on, which is the cursed part of it. But you take my point? Oh, yes, I take your point. But I'm afraid that I do not with any clearness, Marcus said. A legion which went rogue would probably hide its eagle, or hack it into pieces, or simply topple it into the nearest river. It would be most unlikely to have either the wish or the chance to set it up in a temple of some local godling. But an eagle taken in war is a very different case. And the outland tribes, it must seem that they have captured the god of the legion, and so they carry it home in triumph with many torches and perhaps the sacrifice of a black ram, and house it in the temple of their own god to make the young men strong in war and to help the grain to ripen. You see now. Marcus saw. What do you intend doing about it, sir? He asked after a moment. Nothing, for all the evidence I can gather. There may be no shred of the truth in this story. So again, what we've seen here is a conversation about what has happened to the Hispanic. They just disappeared. So the Legate says, well, maybe they all went down fighting, and Placid says 4,000 men all murdered. I don't think so. Like, they probably just killed off a few of their officers and then just deserted Rome. But depending on if we find the eagle, if someone actually is, if it's in a, tribe's, altar to their god or whatever, as set up as like, hey, we beat these guys in war and now we're holding it up to bless our guys, that's a huge deal. It could tell them a lot about what happened to the Hispana and to Marcus's father. So he's like, there may be no shred in the truth, and Marcus says, but if there is still nothing that I can do about it. But sir, it is the eagle, the Hispana's lost eagle, Marcus said, as though trying to drive an idea into the head of one half-witted. And then the Legate's quoting something. Eagle lost, honor lost, all lost. The Legate quoted. Oh yes, I know. The regret in his voice sounded very final. More than that, sir, Marcus was leaning forward, almost stammering in his sudden desperate eagerness. If the eagle could be found and brought back, it might even mean the reforming of the Legion. That I also know, said the Legate, and I know a thing which interests me even more. If trouble were to break out again in the north, a Roman eagle in the hands of the painted people might well become a weapon against us, owing to the powers it would undoubtedly have to fire the minds and hearts of the tribe. So if they're going to fight again and the tribes have the eagle, it will do a lot of good for the tribes because it will really inspire them and really give them a lot of oomph. Like, hey, we beat them once, we can beat them again. But if they lose that symbol, then it would be helpful for Rome and wouldn't be as powerful in their hands. The fact remains that on a mere wind-blown rumor, I can take no action. To send an expeditionary force would mean open war. A whole legion would scarcely win, though, and there are but 3 in Britain. And this is a quote from the movie. But where a legion could not get through, one man might, at least to find out the truth. I agree. If the right man came forward, it would have to be one who knew the northern tribes and would be accepted by them and allowed to pass, and it would have, I think, to be one who cared very deeply for the fate of the Hispana's eagle, else he would not be madman enough to thrust his head into such a hornet's nest. He set down the cup that he had been turning between his fingers while he spoke. If I had had such a one among my men, I would have given him his marching orders. The matter seems to me serious enough for that. Send me, Marcus said deliberately. His glance moved from one to another of the men round the table. Then he turned to the curtained entrance and called, Esca! Hi, Esca! Now by the, began Uncle Aquila, and broke off, for once he was at a loss for words. No one else spoke. Quick footsteps came through the atrium. This curtain was drawn and aside, and Esca appeared on the threshold. The centurion called. In as few words as might be, Marcus told him what was toward. You will come with me, Esca. Esca moved forward to his master's side. His eyes were very bright in the lamplight. I will come, he said. Marcus turned back to the Legate. Esca was born and bred where the wall runs now, and the eagle was my father's. Between us, we fulfill your conditions finely. Send us. A queer silence that had held the other man was shattered abruptly as Uncle Aquila banged an open hand on the table. This is lunacy, sheer unmitigated lunacy. No, but it is not, Marcus protested urgently. I have a perfectly sane and workable plan. In the name of light, listen to me. Uncle Aquila drew breath for a blistering reply, but the legate put in quietly, "Let the boy speak, Aquila." And he subsided with a snort. For a long moment, Marcus stared down at the raisins on his plate, trying to get the rough plan in his head into some sort of order, trying also to remember exactly what Rufrius Galerius had told him that would help him now. That was the surgeon that worked on his leg. Then he looked up and began to speak, eagerly, but with great care and long pauses, rather as though he were feeling his way, as indeed he was. "Claudius Hieronymus, you say that it would have to be one whom the tribes would accept and allow to pass. A traveling occultist would be such a one. There are many sore eyes here in the north, and half the travelers on the roads are quack-salvers. Rufrius Galerius, who used to be a field surgeon with the 2nd, he glanced at his uncle with a half-smile, once told me of a man well known to him, who even crossed the western waters and plied his trade through the length and breadth of Hibernia, and came back with a whole hide to tell the tale. And if an occultist stamp will carry a man safely through Hibernia, of a surety it will carry Esca and me through what was once, after all, a Roman province." He sat up on the couch, almost glaring at the 2 older men, placid as he had forgotten. "It may be that we shall not be able to bring back the eagle, but the gods willing, we will at least find the truth or untruth of your rumor for you." There was a long pause. The legate was looking at Marcus searchingly. Uncle Aquila broke the silence. "An enterprising plan, but with one trifling objection to it, which you would appear to have overlooked." "And what is that?" "You know rather less than an addled egg about the doctoring of sore eyes." "The same could be said for 3 out of 4 quack-salvers on the road, but I shall go on a visit to Rufrius Galerius. Oh, yes, he is a surgeon and not an occultist, I have not forgotten that, but he will know enough of the craft to put me in the way of getting a few needful salves, and give me some idea of how to use them." So an occultist, it's actually, I think at the beginning of the book I thought that it was the same as a druid. It's not. So an occultist in this case is kind of like, let me say, a witch doctor of someone who like claims to have spiritual powers and uses salves to, and some of them do nothing, right? Because he's saying 3 out of 4 of them are just quacks, like just crazy people who are saying that they can do things and can't. But hey, if I actually go to a doctor and get salves from him, and then I like pretend to be an occultist and say, hey, I can heal your if you have, it's probably pink eye. So it's probably like a base that kind of addresses the infection that way. If I had to guess, I don't know for sure. But going around and like healing, and putting the salve on and seeing them heal, and then he'll get the name of being, oh, hey, yeah, it's that one guy, it's the occultist who, visited our tribe over there and did a good job. We heard about you. And that's going to get him through, whereas if he was a Roman legion or, a Roman guy, then they would not. So Uncle Aquila, he nods as to conceding the point. And then after a moment, the legate asked abruptly, "How serviceable is that leg of yours?" Marcus had been expecting the question. "Say that it would not do for the parade ground, very near as serviceable as it ever was," he said. "If we should have to run for it, it would load the dice against us, I grant you, but in strange country we shall not stand a dog's chance on the run anyway." So saying, I may not be able to run long distance if I have to run away from someone, but hey, we wouldn't really have a good chance of that anyway. Again the silence settled, and he sat with his head up, gazing from the legate to his uncle and back again. They were summing up his chances, and he knew it. His chances of coming through. His chances of doing the thing that he went out to do, to find the eagle. Or at least discover if the rumor's true. Moment by lengthening moment, it became more desperately urgent to him that he should win his marching orders. The very life or death of his father's legion was at stake. The legion that his father had loved. And because he had loved his father with all the strength of his heart, the matter was a personal quest to him, and shone as a quest shines. But beneath that shining lay the hard fact of a Roman eagle in his hands that might one day use it as a weapon against Rome. And Marcus had been bred a soldier. So it was in no mood of high adventure alone, but in a soberer and more purposeful spirit that he awaited the verdict. "Claudius Hieronymus, you said just now that had you had the right man among your young men, you would have sent him," he said at last, able to keep silent no longer. "Do I get my marching orders?" It was his uncle who answered first, speaking to the legate as much to Marcus. "The gods of my fathers forbid that I should hold back any kinsman of mine from breaking his neck in a clean cause if he has a mind to." He's not very optimistic about him making it out alive. His tone was distinctly caustic, but Marcus, meeting the disconcerting shrewd eyes under his fierce jet of a brow, realized that Uncle Aquila knew and understood very much more of what all this was meaning to him than he would have somehow expected. The legate said, "You understand the position. The province of Valentia, whatever it once was, whatever it may be again, is now not worth an outworn sandal strap today. You will be going out alone into enemy territory, and if you run into trouble, there will be nothing that Rome can or will do to help you." "I understand that," Marcus said, "but I shall not be alone. Esca goes with me." Claudius Hieronymus bent his head. "Go then. I am not your legate, but I give you your marching orders." Later, after certain details had been thrashed out round the brazier in the atrium, Placidus said an unexpected thing. "I almost wish that there was room for a third." Oh, Placidus. Okay. "I almost wish that there was room for a third in this insane expeditionary force. If there were, Bacchus, I would leave Rome to fend itself for a while and come with you." For a moment, his face had lost its weary insolence. He's such a prideful person, but for a moment he lost it. And as the two young men looked at each other in the lamplight, Marcus was nearer to liking him than he had ever been since they first met. But the faint fellowship was short-lived, and Placidus killed it with a question. "Are you sure that you can trust that barbarian of yours in a venture of this kind?" "Esca?" Marcus said in surprise. "Yes, quite sure." The other shrugged. "Doubtless you know best. Personally, I should not care to let my life hang by so slender a thread as the loyalty of a slave." "Esca and I—" Marcus began and broke off. He was not going to make a circus show of his innermost feelings and Esca's for the amusement of such a tribune service Placidus. "Esca has been with me a long time. He nursed me when I was sick. He did everything for me all the while that I was laid by with this leg." "Why not? He is your slave," said Placidus carelessly. Sheer surprise held Marcus silent for a moment. It was a long time since he had thought of Esca as a slave. "That was not his reason," he said. "It is not the reason that he comes with me now." "Is it not? Oh, my Marcus, what an innocent you are. Slaves are all slaves. Give him his freedom and see what happens." "I will," said Marcus. "Thanks, Placidus. I will." When Marcus, with Cub at his heels, entered his sleeping quarters that night, Esca, who was waiting for him as usual, laid down the belt whose clasps he had been burnishing, and asked, "When do we start?" Marcus closed the door and stood with his back against it. "Probably the morning, that is, for myself at least. The details can wait a while, but first you had best take this." And he held out a slim papyrus roll he had been carrying. Esca took it with a puzzled glance at his face, and unrolling it, he held it to the lamplight. And watching him, Marcus remembered suddenly and piercingly the moment that afternoon when he had taken off Cub's collar. Cub had come back to him. But Esca? Esca looked up from the papyrus so that the paper that he's reading is showing that he's free, and shook his head. "Capitals are one thing," he said, "but I can make nothing of this script. What is it?" "Your manumission. Your freedom," Marcus said. "I made it out this evening, and Uncle Aquila and the legate witnessed it. Esca, I ought to have given it to you long ago. I have been a completely unthinking fool, and I am sorry." Esca looked down to the things in his hands once more, and again back to Marcus, as though he was not sure that he understood. Then he let the roll spring back on itself and said very slowly, "I am free? Free to go?" "Yes," Marcus said, "free to go, Esca." There was a long, dragging silence. An owl cried somewhere far off, with a note that seemed at once desolate and mocking. Cub looked from one to the other and whined softly in his throat. Then Esca said, "Is it that you are sending me away?" "No! It is for you to go or stay as you wish." Esca smiled, the slow, grave smile that always seemed to come a little unwillingly to his face. "Then I stay," he said, and hesitated. "It is perhaps not only I who think foolish thoughts because of the tribune Placidus." "Perhaps," Marcus reached out and set both hands lightly on the other's shoulders. "Esca, I should never have asked you to come with me into this hazard when you were not free to refuse. It is like to prove a wild hunt, and whether or no we shall come back from it lies on the knees of the gods. It's up to the gods whether we make it back alive," is what he's saying. No one should ask a slave to go with him on such a hunting trail. But he might ask a friend. He looked questioningly into Esca's face. Esca tossed the slender papyrus roll onto the cot, and he set his hands over Marcus's. "I have not served the centurion because I was his slave," he said, dropping unconsciously into the speech of his own people. "I have served Marcus, and it was not slave service. My stomach will be glad when we start on this hunting trail." Next morning, promising to pay his old friend another visit on his way north again in the autumn, the legate departed with Placidus, escorted by half a squadron of cavalry. And Marcus watched them ride away down the long road to Regnum and the waiting galleys without quite the heartache that the sight would once have given him before he set about his own preparations. Esca's freedom caused less interest and certainly less ill-feeding in the household than might have been expected. Sastica, Stephanos, and Marcipor, who had all been born slaves, the children of slaves, and Esca, the free-born son of a free chieftain, had never been one of them, even while he ate at their table. They were old and well content with things as they were. They had a good master, and slavery sat easy on them, like an old and familiar garment. Therefore, they did not greatly begrudge freedom to Esca, accepting it as something that was likely to have happened one day or another, he and the young master having been, as Sistica said, the two halves of an almond these moons past, and only grumbled a little among themselves for the pleasure of grumbling. And anyhow, with Marcus going off, as the household had been told, about some sudden business for his uncle next day, and Esca going with them, no one, including Esca, had much time for raising difficulties or even for feeling them. That evening, having made the few preparations that were needful, Marcus went down to the foot of the garden and whistled for Katia. Lately she had always waited to be whistled for, and she came out to him among the wild fruit trees under the old ramparts, with one end of her damson-colored mantle drawn over her head against the heavy spring shower that had come with her. He told her the whole story as briefly as might be, and she heard him out in silence, but her face seemed to grow sharper and more pointed in the way that he knew of old, and when he had finished, she said, "If they want this eagle back, if they fear that it may harm them, where it is, let them send someone else for it. Why need you go?" It was my father's eagle," Marcus told her, feeling instinctively that that would make sense to her, as the other reasons behind his going would never do. Personal loyalty needed no explaining, but when he knew that it was quite beyond him to make Katia understand the queer, complicated, wider loyalties of the soldier, which were as different from those of the warrior as the wave-break curve of the shield boss was from the ordered pattern of his dagger sheath. So it's the metaphor of, anyway, from before. You see, with us, the eagle is the very life of a legion. While it is in Roman hands, even if not 6 men of the legion are left alive, the legion itself is still in being. Only if the eagle is lost, the legion dies. That is why the 9th has never been reformed, and yet there must be more than a quarter of the 9th who never marched north that last time at all. Men who were serving on other frontiers or sick or left on garrison duty, they will have been drafted to other legions, but they could be brought together again to make the core of a new 9th. The Hispana was my father's first legion and his last, and the one he cared for most of all the legions he served in. So you see, it is to keep faith with your father, then. Yes, Marcus said, among other things. It is good to hear the trumpet sounding again, Katia. I do not think that I quite understand, Katia said, but I see that you must go. When will you start? Tomorrow morning. I shall go down to Rufrius Scalarius first, but Cleva will not come in my way again as I go north. And when will you come back? I do not know. Maybe if all goes well before winter. And Esca goes with you? And Cub? Esca, Marcus said, not Cub. I leave Cub in your charge, and you must come and see him every day and talk to him about me. In that way, neither of you will forget about me before I come back. Katia said, we have good memories, Cub and I, but I will come every day. Good, Marcus smiled at her, trying to coax a smile in return. Oh, and Katia, do not mention the eagle to anyone. I am supposed to be going on business for my uncle, only I wanted you to know the truth. The smile came then, but it was gone again at once. Yes, Marcus. That is better. Katia, I cannot stay any longer, but before I go, there's one thing else I want you to do for me. As he spoke, he pulled off the heavy gold bracelet with its engraved signum. So the bracelet that he's worn with kind of like the Medal of Honor I was saying before. The skin showed almond white where it had been on the brown of his wrist. So he has a sharp skin sun tan line. I cannot bear to wear this where I'm going. Will you keep it safe for me until I come back to claim it?" She took it from him without a word and stood looking down at it in her hands. The light caught the Capricorn badge and the words beneath, Pia Fidelis. Pia Fidelis. Very gently she wiped the raindrops from the gold and stowed it under her mantle. "Yes, Marcus," she said again. She was standing very straight and still, very forlorn, and with the darkness of her mantle covering her bright hair as it had done when he first saw her. He tried to think of something to say. He wanted to thank her for the things that he was grateful for, but with everything that was in him reaching out to what lay ahead, somehow he could not find the right words, and he would not give Katya words that meant nothing. At the last moment, he would have liked to tell her that if he never came back, she was to keep the bracelet, but maybe it were better that he told Uncle Aquila. "You must go now," he said. "The light of the sun be with you, Katya." "And with you," said Katya. "And with you, Marcus. I shall be listening for you to come back, for you to come down here to the garden foot and whistle for me again when the leaves are falling." Next instant she had put aside a dripping blackthorn spray and turned from him, and he watched her walking away without a backward glance through the sharp, thin rain. All right. Y'all have a good day.